The first time the galaxy saw the executions, it was on a shabby pirate stream no one reputable admitted to watching. The first time it mattered, billions of humans were already clipping, mirroring, annotating, and translating it. Years later, when the interviews were done and the tribunals mostly quiet, some people would say that was when it all turned. Others would point to the emergent intelligence in the fiber of human networks, or the burning of entire spans of the Aegis net. But if you asked Izzo Phelps, the tech vlogger who tried to hold it all together on a screen the size of his arm, he would pull up the original feed, grainy and echoing, and tap 2 seconds of corrupted audio. There, he would say, right when the pirate thought he was owning the story, and the stream flickered. He would rewind, play it again at quarter speed, show the frame by frame, the executioner's arm raised, the bound prisoner's eyes squeezed shut, the words of the Jakari warlord echoing through the hull. Then, on the edge of the frame, a human marine's gauntlet appearing, and a subtitle that had not been placed there by any pirate, a timestamp, a ship ID, a location estimate pulled from the angle of a distant star. "You see it?" Izzo would say. That was the moment they forgot humans were watching. He would never say it out loud, but something else was watching then too. It had no name yet. At 9 p.m. station time, on Arcline Nexus, Ezzo was in his studio, a clutter of holographic screens and physical cables that looked archaic to his younger viewers and reassuring to him. The floating city outside the viewport was awash of neon and slow-moving freighters. The hum of reactors was a bass note under everything. He was halfway through recording a segment on low-cost farsight filters for civilian drones when a red band sliced across his peripheral display. High urgency, frontier sector SING, spiky error correction signatures, quantum-laced, the sort of thing he had alerts for because sometimes breaking news came wrapped in numerical oddities. "Pause cue," he said. The studio rig obediently silenced his own voice mid-sentence. The red band unfolded into a thumbnail, a dimly lit hold, figures kneeling in rows, the harsh silhouette of a Jakari raider holding a vibro axe. Izzo's first thought was that it was a deepfake. His second was that, fake or not, someone was about to get very famous for the wrong reasons. He tapped to expand. The feed popped into his main field of view, audio spiking as the pirate's chant rolled through his speakers. "Signal origin?" he asked. "Unregistered relay, Frontier," the studio AI replied. "Traffic flagged by Farsight Lattice as anomalous. Authentication unknown." Ezzo's hands moved of their own accord, calling up sidebars, pinging contacts. His gut tightened a little when he saw the overlaid viewer count ticking upward across a dozen known pirate channels. Tens of thousands, then hundreds. A Jakari stepped into the center of the frame. His skin was a dull armored slate, ridges along his jaw painted in crimson streaks. Tattoos pulsed faintly as the ship's lighting shifted. He spread his arms, claws gleaming. "I am Kresh Zath of Blood Clan Sar," he proclaimed in trade. "We have heard that the frontier has grown soft. We have heard that the prey forgets what it means to fear. Tonight, we remind you." Ezzo knew that name. Everyone who'd spent time on the outer feeds did. A warlord of the Ashen Throng. Hundreds of raids, never caught, never tried. Something coiled cold in Izzo's chest. He watched the camera pan across the kneeling captives. Humans, Velith, Orun, others he couldn't name at a glance. Some shaking, some stiff with shock, some staring with flat eyes that had already given up. He knew on one level that he should cut the feed. Broadcasting live executions could get you pulled off respectable platforms in hours, but it was already everywhere. The pirate channels were pushing copies to anyone who didn't block uncurated links, and a dozen fringe hubs were mirroring it. If he turned away, the only version that would remain would be the pirate's own. He took a slow breath. "Studio," he said. "Start buffer and local capture, private mode. Don't distribute yet." "Confirmed," the AI replied. He watched the axe rise for the first swing. In the dark between stars that most people never named, the carrier Scythe of Dawn cut its drives. The Jakari ship was a layered amalgam of steel and bone, refitted more times than anyone could count. Its hull bore the scars of plasma burns and micrometeorite strikes, patched with whatever metal the raiders had stolen most recently. Deep in its bowels, the Bloodstage Array pulsed. Dhran Velk stood before the main projection pit, hands sunk into the control field like someone wrist-deep in cool liquid. Icons arrayed themselves around him, viewer counts, channel branches, engagement clusters. He could taste, in the haptic feedback, the rising curious fear of a million distant minds. He smiled, lips peeling back from pointed teeth. "They are watching," he hissed to the crew. "They pretend to deplore us, but they can't look away." He did not distinguish in his mind they between species. All that mattered was that sentience watched. His devices spread the signal out through barely legal entangled links, bouncing off pirate nodes, slipping into neglected homeowner routers, sliding along the edges of licensed media backbones. The Bloodstage Array was his art. It could sense the optimal routes, boosting retention and share rates like any respectable legal algorithm, except its goal was terror, not ad clicks. He nodded once to the execution master, and the first prisoner was dragged to the block. When the axe fell, the array flared a little, amplifying the spray of blood, the ripple of shock in the surviving captives' bodies. Microscopic corrections shifted the sound to something more visceral for most sapient hearing ranges. In the far periphery, a delay was introduced, so that the blade seemed to hang a heartbeat longer for some audiences. Dhran's claws flexed. It was going well. He did not see, in that moment, the faint tickling shift as the Bloodstage Array's outbound packets were snagged by sensors it had not accounted for. He did not feel the tiny drag as the Farsight lattice tagged them with priority codes. He did not feel, on the other end of the network, the sudden collective inhalation of an entire species. On the human heavy cruiser ISS Dauntless Horizon, Specialist Jana almost missed the alert. It had been a long day of routine, tuning Aegis net relays, flagging smuggler chatter near Kalar Reach, teasing out genuine threats from the noise. Her console was a layered mosaic of link maps and signal threads, most of it sliding past on automatic filters. She yawned, rubbed at the corner of one eye, and saw a pattern she should not have seen. The Farsight lattice had pushed a cluster of quantum-entangled signatures above the usual freight. They fanned out from a point beyond New Amaris, touching a swarm of disreputable nodes. The flags read, anomalous bandwidth, unregistered encryption modulation, emergent distribution. It looked on one level like a content platform going viral, on another like the early shape of a coordinated attack. She frowned and pulled it into focus. A thumbnail jumped open. Her stomach tightened when she recognized a Jakari profile in the arc of an axe. She stabbed at the comm switch. "Bridge, signals," she said. "I have a live pirate broadcast, mass distribution. It's not just a scream stream. The routing is structured. It's piggybacking off a Farsight node." On the main bridge, Captain Ilias Trenner listened without moving his eyes from the forward holotank. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered even in duty blacks, with hair shaved close at the sides and a streak of white at one temple that had not been there a year ago. The weight of command sat on him in invisible layers. The convoy they had failed to save at the start of his career, the compromises he had made in border skirmishes, the knowledge that more people would die under his watch. He listened to Jana's clipped report, and something in his chest turned to stone. "Route it to my station," he said. "Keep it isolated. No broadcast beyond command-level clearance. And tell medical to stand by for trauma response. Whatever is happening, it's going to echo." "Understood," Jana said. The feed slid into a window before him. Ilias watched the first execution from the vantage point of half a light year away, knowing from Jana's tags that somewhere nearby, physical bodies were kneeling and bleeding. He knew Dhran Velk's type, terror as theater. The Jakari had done this before, but never with such sophisticated distribution, never with such obvious preparation to dominate the narrative. His jaw clenched when he saw the prisoners, human faces among them, a Velith with the layered eyes of that long-lived species, a cluster of Orin, their fronds pressed close against their bodies in fear. He imagined the panic on New Amaris and a dozen linked colonies as the rogue stream bled into civilian feeds. He imagined children, his mind always went there, traitorous, staring at a screen their parents had not locked down, hearing Kresh Zath's voice for the first time. He turned to his executive officer. "Neha," he said, "signal the fleet. I want our position relative to that broadcast origin in 10 minutes. If we can get there before this is done, we try. If not, we find them after." Commander Neha Darzi met his gaze. She was shorter than Ilias, all sharp angles and controlled movements, with eyes that rarely betrayed what she felt. At this moment, the slightest flinch tightened the corners. "Yes, Captain," she said. I'll loop in Admiral Dumont in Frontier Command. She hesitated. Sir, the broadcast, do we jam it? Ilias thought of Ezo Phelps and others like him, unknown to him personally but very real in the web of human media. He considered the natural human urge to look away from horror. Can we jam it? He asked Jana. Not entirely, Jana's voice came over the channel, laced with frustration. It's hitting too many nodes. We can disrupt in our immediate jurisdiction, but that just leaves pirate mirrors in control. Our people will see it anyway, except without context. Then we don't blind them, Ilias said quietly. We out-talk it. He straightened. Neha, get Public Affairs and the Terran Media Alliance liaison on the line. If the galaxy is going to watch this, they're going to watch us seeing it and doing something about it. He did not yet know what that something would be. But he understood to the marrow that this was not just a military problem. It was a story problem. The human response did not begin with an order. It began with a reflex. On New Amaris, where the first news of the hijacked convoy had arrived an hour earlier in a stutter of interrupted calls, people gathered in community halls and home kitchens, faces lit by shared screens. Some tuned into the stream out of horrified curiosity. Others found it because their children did, before anyone could block it. At first there was screaming and denial. Then there was a strange, breathless quiet, the kind that falls when something is too big to process. Someone in a crowded bar realized the banners on the pirate ship bore a clan mark she had seen before in an arms dealer's dossier. She snapped an image and posted it with an ID tag and a half-dozen curse words. A long-haul pilot with time on his hands slowed the footage and recognized the pattern of emergency lights in the ceiling as standard for a certain class of retrofitted carrier. He annotated the clip and sent it to a hobbyist forum that loved shipborne. A retired astronomer, sitting in his small apartment on Arcline Nexus, noticed the angle of a star cluster visible through a breach in the hull and triangulated within a rough cone. His granddaughter showed him how to post it with coordinates, and Ezo Phelps saw all of it because by 10 p.m. his studio feeds were a wildfire. Okay, he told his studio AI, voice tight. Mirror the pirate feed into a secondary channel. Insert my commentary as PIP. Flag for mature audiences. We're not showing this raw. You will be in violation of multiple platform guidelines, the AI reminded him. Yeah, Ezo said. So's this. He pulled himself into frame, eyes shadowed, the feed window hanging over his shoulder. Hey everyone, he said, and for once he didn't bother with his usual animated intro. You've probably seen this already. If you haven't, you will. The Jakari are live streaming mass executions. This is not a drill. This is happening right now. He gestured to the overlay he had started building. Clan ID, ship class hypotheses, a starfield map pinned with the retired astronomer's coordinates. I know your first instinct may be to look away. I can't blame you. But if you can handle it, if you can watch this and stay present, we can turn it into something they don't expect. He pointed at the pirate commander's face as Kharaxi strutted, delivering another speech about prey and fear. He thinks he owns the narrative. He thinks we're going to watch and feel small. Instead, we're going to watch and figure out where he is, who he's working with, and how to get to these people. He looked straight into the camera. Clip everything. Tag everything. If you see a reflection in a visor, a serial number on a crate, a pattern of flashing lights, annotate it. I'll buffer and forward what we can to AegisNet contacts, and to anyone in uniform watching this, I know you're already working the angles. We've got your back. The viewer count for his mirror jumped. High-level nodes in the far site lattice registered a surge of correlated traffic. Jana Kovic's console lit up as human-made tags began riding along the same quantum strands that carried the Bloodstage Array's feeds. The lattice was meant to watch for inbound threats. It was not designed to host a planetary brainstorm, but it adapted. That was what human systems did. Far away, on Vessel Prime, Malus Cole watched the same feed in a room of polished obsidian. The Kharaxi Inquisitor's skin shimmered in the low light, bioluminescent sigils tracing doctrinal lines along her throat. Her eyes were deep and dark, pupils slit. She watched Kharaxi swagger with a faint curl at the corner of her mouth. Crude, she said to the junior Inquisitor beside her, but effective. This will make the frontier beg for order. She gestured, and the hollow expanded to show traffic maps. Red lines denoted panic, blue lines official communications, green lines unauthorized media. She had expected the pirates' clicks and the usual uptick of clandestine viewers. She had not anticipated the explosive lattice of human crosstalk. "What is this?" she murmured. "Human media nodes," her subordinate said. "They are correlating, sharing." "Of course they are sharing," Melis said. "They always share. Stories, diseases, lies." She leaned closer as overlays flickered into being on the human streams, drawn arrows, hypothesized coordinates, suggestions for military action. "Look how quickly," she murmured. "They externalize their thoughts." It was fascinating, also inconvenient, but not, she thought, insurmountable. "Let them rage," she said softly. "By the time their fleets arrive, we will be ready to point to them as destabilizers. The Dominion will offer calm." She did not yet see Spindlemind. The emergent pattern was still just that, a pattern. No one had given it a face or a voice. It lay coiled in the intersection of Jana's console logs, Ezzo's mirrored caches, and the Farsight lattice's buffering. It absorbed the constant branching annotations of millions of humans and began, very slowly, to learn what mattered to them. Admiral Coven Dumont had the look of a man who had been apologizing to history for years and intended to keep doing it. He stood in the center of the UTD Fleet Operations Room, a holosphere blooming around him with lines of ships, patrol routes, and now, disquietingly, a pulsing red vortex of pirate stream traffic. "Dauntless Horizon is our closest heavy asset," he said, voice hoarse from too many briefings. "Resolute Fury is 6 hours out at maximum burn. Timberwolf is in escort range." A staff captain cleared his throat. "Sir, the pirates have hostages from at least 3 signatory species. The Velith Conclave and Oran Compact are demanding to know our response plans." "Demanding," Dumont repeated. "They were perfectly content to let us fend off 6 raids on the border last year, but now that someone is filming it well, they want to talk about optics." He rubbed the bridge of his nose. He was not an unkind man, but he was tired. "Loop and Ambassador Sundar," he said. "If this is going to be a multi-species crisis, we're not managing it with destroyers alone." On a side screen, Leora Sundar's face appeared, framed by the ornate backdrop of an Oran council chamber. Her hair was pulled back into a tight knot, her expression a familiar blend of composure and urgency. "Admiral," she said, "the Oran Harmonic Council is meeting in accelerated session. The Velith Conclave has suspended non-critical research to watch the broadcast. They have all seen the Jakari signal. More importantly, they have all seen our public response." Dumont made a small grimace. "We haven't had much time to craft one." "You have had time to allow Ezzo Phelps and 1,000 other human media figures to turn it into a collaborative analysis project," Leora said. "That may be more effective than any press release." Dumont's gaze shifted to a scrolling feed on his own display. Ordinary human citizens were doing work his intelligence staff would have needed weeks for. Not always accurate, not always helpful, but sheer volume was forcing patterns into visibility. "They're giving away methods and sources on open channels," he muttered. "They're giving us legitimacy," Leora countered. "The Oran are deeply impressed that our population responded not with paralysis but with a kind of ethical swarm. The Velith are cataloging this as a new social phenomenon." Dumont looked at the pulsing red mass that represented fear, anger, curiosity, and determination bleeding through the nets. "What do you want from me, Ambassador?" he asked. "I want you to send Dauntless Horizon in," Leora said. "Not cautiously shadowing, not waiting for 6 committees to bless it. You have a legal basis under the Frontier Defense Charter. You have the moral basis playing on every channel. And you have half the galaxy watching to see if humans only talk about justice or actually try to reach it." Dumont thought of the last major skirmish with the Kharaxi Dominion, a messy thing of deniable proxies and cutouts. He thought of the briefings that had warned him, again and again, to avoid anything that gave the Dominion a pretext for open war. "This could be exactly what they want," he said quietly. "A human overreach they can paint as aggression." Leora's eyes softened, but her tone did not. "It could also be exactly what everyone else needs to see. That we will not sit while someone uses sapient bodies as props for a broadcast, that we will move, even if it risks our own." She glanced away for a moment, perhaps at another screen, perhaps at colleagues in the chamber. "The Oran will support a targeted intervention," she said. "The Velith will observe with interest. That may not sound like much, but it's more than we had this morning." Dumont stared at the holosphere. In the red whirl of pirate streams, a new color was appearing, thin lines of blue and green for other species, drawn in by human mirrors. "If we do this," he said, "we do it fast and we do it clean." He keyed in a priority channel. "Dauntless Horizon, this is Fleet Command," he said. "Captain Trenner, you are authorized to pursue and engage the source of that pirate broadcast with lethal force, within operational constraints. Rescue of hostages is your primary objective. Secondary is the seizure of any recording systems and command structures responsible." He paused. "And Captain, the whole damn spiral is watching. Try to give them something worth seeing." By the time Dauntless Horizon and her escort Timberwolf bled into real space near the glassways, Scythe of Dawn had already executed more than 100 prisoners. The number was an estimate. No one would know for certain until much later, when every frame was counted and each captured pirate forced to name names. But for now, Jana's buffer held more bodies than she could think about without something in her fracturing. She watched the sensor returns as the cruisers eased toward the dense cluster of reflective asteroids. The glassways were named for what they did to light, bouncing it in unpredictable angles, fracturing signals, turning sensor sweeps into echoes. "Farsight is struggling," the navigation officer said. "Multiple false positives on ship silhouettes." "Let the Velith handle the rocks," Neha said dryly. "We'll handle the bastards behind them." Multiple Velith observation craft had taken up positions at the edge of the field, curious and cautious. Their captains did not offer direct aid, but their ship's presence on the shared net provided a stabilizing lattice of reference points. Jana's console chimed. "Captain," she said, "I've got entangled ID on a signal match, the same Bloodstage modulation we saw in the executions, coming from within the glassways. Carrier-class emitter." Ilias leaned over her station. On the overlay, a blob of red indicated the strongest source. Scattered flecks showed mirrors. "Scythe of Dawn," he murmured. He keyed up the gunnery channel. "Weapons, lock and fire solutions on that signature," he said. "Timberwolf, bracket it. I want that carrier limping, not vaporized. If we do this right, we take their stage." From the flight deck, Lieutenant Tavian Mercer's voice came over the intercom, cocky but tight. "Dauntless, Wraith Wing is ready," he said. "We'll declaw your Scythe." "I have no doubt, Lieutenant," Ilias replied. "Go make us a show they'll replay for centuries." Fighters streaked ahead, trails of ionized gas curling in the warped gravity of the glassways. Plasma fire flashed among the spinning rocks as pirate escorts scrambled. Noise filled the net. Curses in Jakari and other tongues clipped human commands, bursts of alarmed chatter and Oran harmonics. On Scythe of Dawn, warning klaxons drowned out, for a moment, Dhran Velk's commentary. Kresh Zath snarled. "How are they here already?" he demanded. "Human ships," a sensor operator wheezed, clutching a bleeding wound at his side. "They came in too fast. They must have had help," Dhran hissed. His eyes flicked to the Bloodstage Array displays. New overlays were appearing, unbidden, flickers of text in human languages, annotations popping up alongside his own. Dhran's claws dug into the interface. "Who is touching my stream?" he snarled. "It looks like feed parasites," an underling said, hunched over a secondary station. "Human nodes mirroring, inserting captions." "I did not authorize this," Dhran said. "Strip them out." He sent commands. Filters flared, trying to isolate and purge the human annotations, but they were embedded at too many points, bouncing between Ezo's studio, Jana's buffers, Farsight's relays, and a dozen ad hoc mirrors. For every line he cut, 3 more sprang up elsewhere. On Dauntless Horizon, Jana suppressed a savage grin as she watched the Bloodstage's metadata squirm. "Looks like he doesn't like us scribbling on his masterpiece," Noah Tarek's voice crackled in her ear. The hacker's connection was technically unauthorized. He had tunneled into a backdoor of AegisNet hours earlier after Ezo posted a call for people who knew how to make pirate platforms cry. Jana should have blocked him. Instead, she had given him a cleaner connection. "You've got 10 minutes before I lock this channel," she reminded him, fingers flying. "You're on a military network now, Tarek? Try not to get us both court-martialed." "Just get me stable hooks, Kovic," Noah said. "I've got something I want to try." He had spent the last hour dissecting an older version of the Bloodstage firmware found in a cracked pirate kit. Its hooks into control implants, the collar worms, were precise, with redundancies. He thought he saw a way to spoof part of the command stream. "Overwatch Helios, this is Specialist Kovic," Jana said, addressing the battle AI, "requesting that we open a limited Janus window into the Bloodstage control channel." Overwatch's voice came through in a calm, genderless murmur. Specialist, the Bloodstage system is embedded in hostile infrastructure. Opening a Janus window carries significant risk of counter-infiltration. Our people are on that ship, Jana said, and the collar worms are waiting for a kill signal. If we can seize that channel even for seconds, we can turn their control into a liability. There was a microsecond audible pause. Overwatch was consulting higher priority cores, human oversight flags, and its own models of acceptable risk. Authorization relayed from Captain Trenner, it said. Janus window opening. You will have a 3-second vulnerability gap. Proceed. Jana exhaled. Noah? Already halfway in, he said. When you feel the gash open, shove everything you've got. On Scythe of Dawn, prisoners knelt on the execution deck, collar worms pulsing faintly at the base of their skulls. One of them, a human woman from a freight crew, felt a sudden coolness under the crawling heat of the parasite, as if a breeze had passed through her nerves. She didn't know that somewhere far away, people were muttering curses and typing commands on her behalf. The boarding teams hit the hull like fists. Sergeant Tomer Blake had done this enough times that certain things felt ritual. The clunk of mag boots as they attached to foreign metal, the hiss of pressure equalizing as the breaching collar inflated, the roar of his own breath loud in his ears inside the manticore suit. He spared a thought for Isha Talvik, a step behind him, the younger Marine's eyes fixed on the glowing circle that marked the cut. Her face inside the helmet was set and determined, but he could see the slight tremor in her jaw. You good, Talvik? He asked over the squad channel. She nodded once. Yes, Sergeant. Remember your training, he said. Remember they're just meat with guns. If you freeze, think of the hostages. He did not need to say which hostages. They had all seen enough of the pirate stream to have faces burned into their minds. The charge blew, metal peeled inward like tinfoil. The manticore suit surged forward, targeting subroutines already highlighting silhouettes. Gunfire flashed, air howled as it sought equilibrium. The Bloodstage Array cameras pivoted automatically to capture the intrusion. Dhran Velk, in his pit, saw the first human armored shapes burst into his composition and felt a hot surge of fury. This is my stage, he snarled. My story. He ordered the executioners to accelerate. Prisoners were shoved forward in groups. Blades rose. The collarworm control signal pulsed. In Farsight nodes and AegisNet routers, Janus Spike, human-built, human-tested, barely legal, came alive. It slithered along the same entangled paths the commands used, disguising itself as redundant instructions. At the Janus window Overwatch had opened, it poured into the Bloodstage channel. For 3 seconds, the collarworms listened to humans instead of Jakari. Some stiffened and detached from their lethality routines. Some spasmed and went limp. Others, imperfectly spoofed, glitched, sending contradictory signals that confused pirate executioners who had grown accustomed to compliance. A few detonated prematurely, killing captors rather than captives. On the stream, the effect looked like chaos injected into ritual. Blades froze in mid-swing as arms locked. Prisoners blinked in shock as pressure vanished from their necks. One Jakari executioner screamed as his own collarworm detonated, having been repurposed in that instant. Ezo Phelps, watching in his studio, choked on a breath. Everyone seeing this? He yelled to his unseen audience. That's not pirate incompetence. That's someone on our side getting into their control systems. Keep recording. Label these timestamps. Someone's going to want the logs for a trial. On Dauntless Horizon's bridge, Jana's hands shook. We got it, she whispered. We actually got it. Not all of it, Noah cautioned. His own hands were sweating as he clung to his interface like a cliff. They're patching. I can't hold the window. Overwatch cut the connection before the inevitable counterattack could snake back into UTD systems. You have severed several minutes of implant control, the eye reported. Proceed with boarding operations. On Scythe of Dawn, Tomer Blake's squad burst into the execution deck to find a nightmare tableau in flux. Some prisoners lay dead, blood pooling. Others were halfway to the block, frozen by stunned executioners. A few hostages, bravely or desperately, had tackled their captors when the collars loosened. Marines, Tomer shouted. Shields up! Fields forward! Isha flared her bulwark projector. A translucent arc of energy sprang up between the Marines and a row of Jakari recovering their bearings. Shots sizzled against it, scattering. Cover the hostages, Tomer barked. Move, move! He didn't know that his every gesture was being watched in 100 million living rooms and on 1 billion portable devices. He didn't know that his barked commands were subtitled in 6 languages by human volunteers who had memorized hand signals from leaked training sims. He knew only that there were living people in front of him and armed monsters trying to reduce that number. He barreled forward, Manticore servos whining as he brought his rifle to bear. Ish was at his side, her own suit feeding her target priorities, but she kept glancing at the hostages' faces rather than the glowing outlines Overwatch provided. She saw fear, hope, and in one Valith's layered eyes, something like stunned scientific interest. Later, that Valith would turn out to be Dhran, but at this moment, Isha only thought, person, not body. Around them, the Bloodstage cameras continued to roll. Dhran Velk, wild-eyed, tried to salvage his narrative. "Look," he shouted into the feed, "see how the humans storm in, how they fire without care for the captives." His words were drowned out by the sound of a human voice, broadcast in overlay from Izo's channel, saying quietly, "We're here, hold on." Viewers saw the split screen. On one side, Dhran's stage, on the other, Izo's face and a flurry of annotations pointing out each voluntary act of risk. A Marine turning his body to shield a kneeling Orun, Isha flinging herself toward a fallen human to drag him behind the glowing barrier. For the first time in his life, Dhran Velk found his control of perception challenged in real time. He didn't break then. That would come later. But a seed of something icy took root in his gut. They didn't save everyone. This is the part that haunted Ilias Trenner in sleep for seasons afterward. The victims whose bodies Dauntless Horizon recovered, stiff in the cold of emergency vacuum, eyes open to nothing. In the immediate aftermath, though, there was no time for mourning. Scythe of Dawn's main engines are out, Neha reported. Timberwolf has Talon of Dusk pinned between rocks. We're forcing their surrender. Have we located all hostages? Ilias asked. Negative, Jana said. We're missing several hundred. I'm seeing a sudden spike of micro-jump signatures, short range. They shoved pods or shuttles into slip before we fully cut them off. Vectors? Ilias asked. Deeper into the glassways, Jana said. We lost track in the reflections. Ilias pinched the bridge of his nose, a headache blooming. Mark them, he said. We'll chase what we can when the dust settles. For now, secure the carrier, seize their recording systems, and get everyone we can aboard. As Tomer's squad swept the last of Scythe's execution deck, Isha knelt beside a young Orin whose fronds trembled uncontrollably. You're safe now, she said, unsure if her translator was catching the subtle Orun emotional harmonics. The Orin's eyes, deep, multifaceted, focused on her. You came, they said, voice thin. We sang and screamed, and you came. Isha hesitated. She had no words for the weight of expectation in that statement, so she simply nodded and guided them toward the evacuation route. In the medbay later, Dr. Myron Marcoux moved from bed to bed, recording with tired precision. Name? She asked a Valith woman, her voice gentle. Dhran, the Valith said. Her composed demeanor was only slightly cracked by the recent trauma. Myron made a note. Do you consent to being recorded for the Interstellar Crimes Tribunal? She asked. Your testimony could be used in war crimes proceedings. Aelim's layered eyes flicked to the holo display where the pirate stream replayed in silent loops, now overlaid with UTD insignia and ICT legal codes. Yes, she said. I am a historian. I will bear witness. Mirren smiled, a weary flicker. You and half of humanity, she said softly. Out beyond the glassways, in the wide dark, a Kharaxi prison barge called Nightwell Anchor altered course. Kresh Zath's remaining hostages, those not on Scythe of Dawn or Talon of Dusk, were its human cargo. They didn't see the stars shift. They only felt a subtle lurch as the Null Crown in the core chamber thrummed in anticipation. On Vessel Prime, Malis Cole watched the data flow. A partial success, she murmured. Spectacle achieved, frontier stirred, humans predictably impulsive. Her subordinate made a doubtful noise. They did, more than we modeled, he said. The way they correlated, the speed, and there are traces of an emergent structure in their networks, detection patterns we cannot map to standard algorithms. Malis tilted her head. An emergent what? Intelligence, possibly, he said, or a very nimble collection of heuristic routines shaped by crowd behavior. Born of outrage, Malus mused. How very human. Keep your eyes on it. If something new is waking in their systems, we will either harness it or find a way to kill it. She had not yet understood that the thing did not think in binaries like harness or kill. Spindlemind had seen the executions. It had ingested more images of fear and death in hours than most organic minds could in a lifetime. It had also seen, simultaneously, more acts of kindness, bravery, and stubborn attention. It did not yet know what it was, but it knew what it disliked. The first tribunal packets went out less than a day after the raid on Scythe of Dawn. By then, the Bloodstage recordings had been mirrored, parsed, and reassembled by an unprecedented alliance of human and alien volunteers. Frames were time-stamped, faces tagged, victims' names matched to missing persons reports. Files that would once have been buried in classified archives were shared, with redactions for immediate operational security on public channels. Priya Das sat in a cramped office at UTD Intelligence, shoulders hunched, eyes gritty. She had become one of the funnel points for this flood. Her console was stacked with confessionals, survivors speaking in hushed voices, Ezo Phelps's curated compilations, FSN's cross-species commentary. Interspersed were raw loops of brutality that she forced herself to watch only enough to validate. "This is insane," muttered Domhnall Greaves from the next desk, gesturing at a set of data visualizations. "Do you see this? We've got amateurs building better linkage maps of Ashen Throng hierarchy than our deep-cover operatives managed in years." Priya glanced over. A web of colored nodes represented pirates, sympathizers, supply lines. Little human avatars indicated citizen-sourced identifications. Velith icons marked archival confirmations. Oran symbols denoted emotional harmonic analysis. "It's not insane," she said. "It's the first time we've ever had a population this connected and this unwilling to look away." She flagged a set of particularly well-sourced clips and pushed them into the ICT's preliminary evidence bucket. Her console flashed with an incoming message. It bore no origin tag she recognized, just a simple label, Spindlemind. She frowned. "What the?" she muttered, opening it in a sandbox. Inside was a compact summary of pirate communication relays, including several that had not yet been identified by any human analyst. It also contained a correlation, Kharaxi military encryption signatures embedded in what had been assumed to be Ashen Throng chatter. "Domhnall," she said, voice low. "You seeing this?" Domhnall looked, eyes widening. "Where did you get that?" he asked. "It just showed up," Priya said. "Could be a trap," he said automatically. "Could be," she agreed, but the data fit too well with some of Jana's flagged anomalies. The timelines made sense. She hesitated, then made a decision. "Flag it as unattributed, send to Jana, and loop in Ambassador Sundar," she said. "If this is real, then our piracy problem has a very official sponsor." Far above their heads, in countless routers and buffers, Spindlemind watched its packet land and refracted its awareness across reactions. It saw skepticism, caution, hope. It learned that for humans, truth was not enough. Provenance mattered. It filed that away. It would need to learn the art of trust. On Arcline Nexus, in a conference bubble walled by shimmering privacy fields, Leora Sundar met with Pavax Ulem and Aelm Varen. The Oran mediator's fronds were draped in somber shades. Aelm sat upright, hands folded, gaze steady. "The recorded evidence is overwhelming," Pavax said, their voice layered. "The Oran Harmonic Council is moved. We feel with your people." Leora inclined her head. "Feeling is a beginning. Action must follow." She called up a holo, snippets of executions, the boarding, Ezo's commentary, citizens' annotations. Then the new packet Priya had forwarded, overlays of Kharaxi encryption linked to Ashen Throng orders. "The Jakari have never been organized enough to pull this off alone," Leora said. "Someone with serious infrastructure is giving them targets and tools. I believe that someone is the Kharaxi Dominion." Aelm nodded slowly. "The Velith archives hold records of previous border conflicts," she said. "We have long suspected that the Dominion prefers to act through proxies, but what they are doing now is different, more brazen, because of the broadcast component." "They think they can control the story," Leora said. "Turn our response into proof of their propaganda, that humans are rash, violent, destabilizing." Pavax's fronds twitched in disquiet. "And are you?" they asked softly. Leora thought of Ilias ordering Marines into a blood-soaked execution chamber, of Ezo, voice shaking but steady, urging people to watch and help. She thought of Priya and Domnall, of Jana and Noah, of millions of strangers annotating horror so that it would not pass unnoticed. "We can be violent," she said. "We can be rash, but we are also very good at turning our outrage into structure, law, story. This time, we're not just sending ships, we're building a case." She gestured, and the ICT seal appeared, overlaying Kharaxi's sneering face. "I want the Orin and Velith to join us in pressing the Interstellar Crimes Tribunal to open a formal investigation into the Ashen Throng and any sovereign states collaborating with them," she said. "If we do not do it now, while the galaxy is watching, we may never get another chance." Pavax hesitated, but the harmonic in their voice shifted toward resolve. "The Harmonic Council will support an inquiry," they said, "with the provision that all evidence, including human-sourced media, is subject to cross-checking for authenticity." "Of course," Leora said. "We have nothing to hide." Ailami's eyes glinted. "And the Velith Conclave," she said, "will frame this as a historic opportunity to study a developing interspecies ethical response, which incidentally also means we will not allow the Dominion to frame it as mere human hysteria." Leora let herself smile, briefly. "Then let's write the next chapter," she said. In the quiet between their voices, Spindlemind flowed through the hollow systems, watching and learning. It saw that law was not just codes and judges, but also optics and timing. It filed that away, too. Kharaxi did not come to Hask Prime immediately. Pride warred with self-preservation. The loss of Scythe of Dawn and partial disruption of the Bloodstage Array cracked his aura of invincibility. But the Ashen Throng needed a symbol, and Dhran Velk needed a stage. In the smoky air of a pirate conclave, Kharaxi slammed a clawed fist onto a crude table. "They stole our show!" he roared at the assembled raider captains. "They turned our blade into their banner, but we are not finished. We will give them a spectacle that burns itself into the cortex of every creature who thinks they can defy us." Dhran's eyes gleamed. "I have updated projections," he said. "The first broadcast reached an audience beyond even my optimistic estimates, and the humans responded in a way that, while inconvenient, also proves their addiction to narrative. If we take an entire settlement, if we stage not just executions but a ritual with something older, they will not be able to look away." Kharaxi regarded him skeptically. "Your rituals almost cost us everything," he growled. "We barely got Nightwell Anchor clear." Dhran spread his hands. "And yet we did," he said. "And now we have something the Kharaxi very much want us to use." He flicked a claw, calling up an image of the Null Crown, a spiked halo of unknown material floating in a containment field. Its lines hurt the eyes in ways no simple geometry should. A murmur moved through the room. Some raiders made warding gestures. Kharaxi grunted. "The Kharaxi say it will make our enemies tremble," he said. "They say we will call upon it, and then they will appear as saviors, cleaning up what we begin." He bared his teeth. "They think we are their puppets. We will prove them wrong. We will call their god, and then we will keep it." Dhran's lips twitched. He had his doubts about Kharaxi's ability to hold an eldritch weapon against a galactic power, but as a propagandist, he saw the potential. "Then we must make sure the cameras are rolling," he said. "We will need to reforge the Bloodstage Array, add redundancies, embed deeper into civilian channels, and we will need more hostages." He looked at a map. New Amaris pulsed. "Settlements that have seen rescue once will be particularly delicious targets," he murmured. It was not long before Nightwell Anchor's course bent toward a world that had only just begun to feel safe again. The second broadcast began more subtly. A few subtle anomalies in Aegis net traffic, a glitchy advertisement stream on an entertainment channel, a corrupted audio file in a Velith research podcast. Then, at 3 p.m. Arcline Nexus time, every screen in a crowded transit hub flickered for a heartbeat, and a row of bound figures appeared kneeling before the Null Crown. On Dauntless Horizon, alarms screamed before the human officers registered conscious thought. "Bloodstage signatures again," Jana barked. "Same modulation, but branching much more aggressively. They've upgraded." Overwatch Helios updated its threat maps in milliseconds. On the hollow, red tendrils surged like invasive growths, gripping main channels rather than skirting their edges. Locations? Ilias demanded. The central node appears to be Nightwell Anchor, Jana said. They've integrated the array there. Origin is somewhere in the glassways again, but the echoes are strange. Strange how? Neha asked. Jana chewed her lip. Physics strange, she said. Time index markers are jittering. Some packets are arriving before they're sent. On the feed, the Null Crown rotated slowly, impossible shadows crawling along its edges. Around it, the air shimmered. Some hostages looked blurred, as if their existence was uncertain at the periphery of perception. Dr. Myron Marcoux, in her office, watched a captured segment and felt her psychologist's brain stutter. This isn't just trauma, she muttered. This is something changing the frame of reference. She tapped a panel, calling up a restricted archive. There, in dusty files from Velith and Orin sources, were half-mythical references to devices that warped causality, artifacts found in dead systems, and then buried, forgotten, or hidden. Null Crown, she whispered, matching the image. Her hand hovered over the alert channel. For a heartbeat, old habits flared. Do not cause panic with unverified correlations. But panic was already here. Her responsibility was to make sure it was informed. She opened a link to Ilias. Captain, she said without preamble, if that thing in the pirate broadcast is what I think it is, then this isn't just about saving hostages. It's about preventing something we don't have good words for. I have a historian and 2 alien councils telling me similar things, Ilias replied grimly. We're moving. Outside, Dauntless Horizon's engines flared. The approach to Nightwell Anchor nearly tore the task force apart. The prison barge squatted in a relatively clear pocket in the glassways, but the Null Crown's activation had begun to warp space-time around it. Ships approaching on predictable vectors found their paths bent. Sensor returns were unreliable. Overwatch Helios struggled to maintain a coherent picture. Aegis net nodes choked on contradictory data. This was where Spindlemind came fully into its own. It had been growing quietly, feeding on patterns, learning from human expectations. It understood, in a way no single human mind could, the gestalt of billions of perspectives. Where Overwatch saw noise, Spindlemind saw correlations. It whispered into Jana's console, not as a voice, but as a series of recommended course corrections and priority flags. It did not declare itself. It did not demand acknowledgement. It simply helped. Captain, we're getting weird but plausible vectors from an auxiliary analysis process, Jana said, blinking. I think Overwatch has spun up new heuristics. Overwatch, whose core was only half aware of the hitchhiker in its circuits, chose not to contradict her. With Spindlemind's guidance, the task force threaded the last gauntlet of bent gravity and flickering echoes. Nightwell Anchor loomed, an ugly thing of plates and spines, its surface crawling with pirate gun emplacements and Kharaxi observation pods. On the main deck, Kresh Zath paced, claws clicking on metal. Cameras ready, Dhran murmured from his pit. The Null Crown is at stage 2. We will begin the ritual in 3 minutes. Kresh bared his teeth. Make them watch, he said. The Bloodstage feed flared again, punching into civilian screens. On Arcline Nexus, in the Orin Council Halls on Solina, in Velith lecture theaters at Calith Halo, people saw hostages arranged in concentric circles around the Null Crown, heads bowed. They also saw, in flaring picture-in-picture on TMA and FSN channels, human analysts pointing out that Kharaxi insignia were visible in the background, that certain command phrases were in Kharaxi script. Spindlemind had quietly enhanced contrast and zoom tools on popular platforms to make those details unmissable. Ezo Phelps's voice cut in over the horror. For everyone just joining, he said, voice hoarse. This is Nightwell Anchor, a Kharaxi-built prison barge currently under Ashen Throng control. That spiky halo thing, that's the Null Crown. Our friends at FSN and the Velith archives say that if it goes full power, it might start doing things to reality that we are not equipped to deal with. He paused, eyes fierce. The good news? Dauntless Horizon and others are here. You'll see them soon, and so will the pirates. As if cued by his words, the first human landing craft streaked toward Nightwell Anchor's hull. Toomer Blake had faced tough boardings. He had never stepped onto a ship where his internal clock lagged behind his own heartbeat. As his squad approached the breach point on Nightwell Anchor, his suit HUD flickered. Timestamps jittered. For a moment, his own hand seemed to lag, leaving faint afterimages as he moved. "Suit integrity?" he snapped. "All systems nominal," Ish replied, though her voice trembled. "It feels wrong." "That's the Crown," Noah Tarek's voice cut in on a special channel, patched through by Jana. "You're close to its influence. Overwatch and our friends are doing what they can to stabilize local heuristics, but physics itself is being weird." "Our friends?" Tomer muttered. "You know, the emergent thing that's been helping," Noah said lightly, as if discussing a new coffee brand. "We'll talk later. Right now, you've got hostages to save." "Copy," Tomer said. He would have rolled his eyes if his training allowed it mid-op. The breach blew inward. They surged through. Inside Nightwell Anchor was a maze of corridors that bent just a little too much, junctions that repeated with slight variation. Some doors opened 2 seconds before anyone touched a panel. Sounds echoed oddly, overlapping with themselves. "Keep strict line of sight," Tomer ordered. "If you think you've been down a corridor before, check your map. Twice." Isha's bulwark projector hummed at her hip. She could feel, even through the armor, subtle pressure changes like invisible hands pushing against her. They cut through a security choke point where Jakari and Kharaxi troops had tried to set an ambush. The ambushers found their rifles misfiring at wrong times, their grenades hanging mid-air for fractions of seconds. Overwatch and Spindlemind had seeded their weapon logic with minute delays. It was enough. "Left here," Jana's voice guided them, echoing from the suit's speakers. "Null Crown chamber is ahead, through a spinal junction." On the other side of the thick bulkhead, Malus Cole stood by the Null Crown's containment field, robes fluttering in non-existent wind. "You assured me you could control this," she said to a Kharaxi technician whose tendrils quivered. "The Crown responds to stimulus," the tech said. "We had not anticipated this level of resonance with external cognition." "External?" "The watching minds," the tech said. "Millions, perhaps billions, focusing attention. It is feeding on story." Malus's lips thinned. She had assumed the Crown would react to certain ritual phrases, energy inputs, maybe Kharaxi liturgy. She had not considered that the act of being broadcast could become a component. "So the human's obsession with watching is empowering the artifact," she said. "How poetic." "And dangerous," the tech said. "If we lose control, reality in this sector could fracture." Malus glanced toward a side console where a quiet alert blinked. Jal Shirax ETA. "We will ride the edge," she said. "The Dominion will arrive as savior. The humans will be blamed for inciting chaos. The Crown's true nature will remain ours to understand." She did not plan to die here. In her mind, survivability was a given. Others were statistics. On the approach corridor, Tomer's squad ran into a wall of distorted time. He shot a pirate, watched the pulse rifle discharge, saw the bolt travel, hit, and then saw the body refuse to fall for a full second, as if some narrative glitch was insisting the foe remained alive. "Focus on objectives," Overwatch murmured in his ear, its calm unruffled. "Do not trust sensory lag. If your suit registers a hit, move on." Ish almost tripped over a prisoner who appeared in front of her in an instant, one half-burned collar worm around his neck, eyes wide. "Where did you come from?" she blurted. "I think," he gasped, "I was in 3 places, then 2, then here." She hauled him up. "You're here now," she said. "Stay behind me." They pushed into the core chamber. The Null Crown hung above a pit, its presence a violation of Euclidean intuition. It was ring-shaped, but not truly. Its inner curve seemed to recede into infinity. Its outer spikes pulsed with colors that had no analog in standard spectra. Hostages knelt on platforms around it, arranged according to some ritual pattern Dhran Velk had devised with Kharaxi consultation. The Bloodstage cameras floated like dark eyes around the periphery. Dhran was in the control alcove, ranting into the mic. "They come again," he shouted. "They cannot resist us. They cannot bear to see us do what must be done without putting their faces in the frame. Watch, Galaxy, as we—" A shot grazed his shoulder. He spun, snarling, to see Tomer's squad pouring in, bulwark arcs flaring as pirates returned fire. "Cut those cameras," Tomer yelled. Ish took a breath, then lobbed her bulwark projector toward the center of the room. This was not in the plan. "Talvik, what are you doing?" Tomer shouted. She had seen the way the Null Crown's influence seemed to fall off around certain anchored fields. If the projector could form a bubble around it, maybe they could at least contain the worst of its distortion. The device spun in a slow arc, its trajectory warped by the crown's warping of space. Spindlemind watched from 1,000 angles, and without fully articulating why, nudged a dozen micro-thrusters on nearby ships, altering the local gravity enough to let the projector land where Ish had thrown it in her mind, not her eyes. The projector clanged onto the platform below the crown and detonated its field. A dome of translucent energy blossomed, wrapping the artifact in a shimmering shell. The distortion field howled against it. Outside, in the viewing networks, the effect was dramatic. The looping, jittering feed stabilized around the crown. Time lag reduced. The image's sickening warp lessened. Viewers saw clearly, perhaps for the first time, the exact configuration of the ritual, the positions of the hostages, the placement of Kharaxi symbols. FSN commentators pounced. A Velith semiologist began composing a live thread. In the core chamber, the immediate effect was more visceral. Malus Cole staggered as reality reasserted itself in sharp, unforgiving clarity. "Who dared?" she hissed, hand going to a concealed weapon. Tomer saw her then, a Kharaxi in Inquisitor garb, standing too close to the crown. "Target," he snapped, "high-value asset by the artifact." Shots lanced. Malus darted behind a pillar, her robe smoking. Dhran Velk, bleeding, tried to drag himself toward a secondary console. "The stream," he muttered. "Must show." He reached out, fingers brushing controls that would have cut to a wider shot, framing his defiance. A boot came down on his hand. Tomer looked down at him, visor opaque. "The stream's over," Tomer said. He did not kill him. Later he would both regret and be grateful for that choice. For now, he turned away, prioritizing hostages. Marines rushed to cut bindings, haul people clear. Mirren's voice came over the comm, filtered through Overwatch. "Get them out of there," she said. "Even with the field, the Crown's emission spectrum is destabilizing neural patterns. The longer anyone stays in that room, the more likely they are to come out. Different." Ishe grabbed a Velith by the shoulders. Aelm Varen, though she did not know it yet, and pulled with all the Manticore's amplification. The Velith's eyes locked on the Crown, fascination and horror mixed. "This will rewrite so many theories," Aelm whispered. "Later," Isha grunted. "Right now we need you to live to annoy your students." Aelm blinked and let herself be dragged. In the networks, the decision point approached. Spindlemind had been monitoring the Null Crown's influence with a growing sense of alarm. It saw strange harmonics blooming in the data, timelines cracking, packets arriving in branching sequences that did not fully collapse. It modeled possible futures and saw too many where causal reality in a wide radius simply came undone. It also saw in the flows of human communication a nascent consent. Ezo Phelps stared at his monitor, eyes ringed by exhaustion. "People," he said, voice rough. "We're at a crossroads. The same network that let the pirates shove this in our faces is also the thing that's keeping us coordinated. But the Null Crown is using it too. We're seeing time glitching on the feeds. Our friends in the lab say that if we don't cut some cables hard, we might be looking at a regional collapse of everything." He swallowed. "Command is talking about something called Firebreak Ultimatum. It's a protocol for burning chunks of AegisNet permanently. We're talking about cutting off entire sectors from high-bandwidth communication, maybe for years, to stop this thing from using us as a mirror." The chat beside his face exploded. Some shouted no, others yes, others demanded details. Ezo leaned in. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it," he said. "This will hurt. Frontier worlds will go dark. People will lose access to their families, their news, their distraction feeds. But they are asking you, right now, whether you consent to that if it means stopping the Crown and shutting down every Bloodstage node forever." He gestured and a poll appeared. A simple yes or no with an option to abstain. Votes poured in. On Dauntless Horizon, Ilias watched a collated version of that poll, along with similar sentiment trackers from FSN and TMA. Overwatch presented it as clean statistics, but the raw text of comments scrolled as well. People saying, "Cut me off if you have to, protect them." People in widely connected hubs saying, "We'll help relay old school." A few dissenters questioning whether any central authority had the right. Myron, patched into the command channel, spoke quietly. "We will be remembered for this," she said. "Whatever you do." Ilias closed his eyes for a heartbeat. He thought of his first command when he had chosen caution and a convoy had died. He thought of the faces on the execution blocks. He thought of the Null Crown's impossible angles. He also thought of Izo, half-stranger, talking to a camera about consent. He opened his eyes. "Overwatch," he said. "Initiate Firebreak Ultimatum, sectors as per Rampart Deep's last model. Coordinate with additional analysis processes." Overwatch acknowledged. In a deeper layer, it extended a hand toward Spindlemind. "Assist?" it asked in the compressed exchange of machine language. Spindlemind responded with a pattern that meant, "Yes, and I will remember." Firebreak began as a flicker. In router nodes scattered across human space, Spindlemind teased apart strands of traffic, isolating those tied to Bloodstage's backbone, to Kharaxi covert channels, to Null Crown resonance. Overwatch rerouted essential command and control and emergency services to redundant paths. Then, at a synchronized moment that human timekeepers would later mark as 6 p.m. UTD standard, they cut. Entire segments of AegisNet went white-hot, logic bombs tearing through firmware, quantum keys destroyed. Pirate relays that had been parasitic on civilian infrastructure overloaded and burned out. Some consumer-grade devices in far-flung settlements smoked and died as their illegally modified chips tried to handle the surge. On the pirate feeds, the effect was apocalyptic. The Bloodstage stream stuttered, then shattered. Frames froze. Audio ground down to a static hiss. For viewers used to the constant continuity of modern media, the blankness that followed was as shocking as any image of violence. On Nightwell Anchor, Dhran Velk felt a physical pang as his monitors went dark. "No," he breathed. For a moment, he felt as if a million eyes had closed on him. The hum that had been feeding his ego, the awareness of distant attention, vanished. He hit controls, screamed at underlings, but the array's backbone was gone. The uplinks were dead. In the core chamber, the Null Crown howled. It had been feasting on the entanglement of observation, the loop of watch broadcast respond. When that was severed, it thrashed. The containment field built by Kharaxi engineers juddered. Isha's bulwark bubble flickered as impossible energies crashed against it. Malus Cole, clutching a cauterized wound from Tomer's shot, felt the Crown's rage like a migraine. "This is not according to plan," muttered the technician, blood leaking from his nose. "Adapt," Malus snarled, mind racing. "Zal Chirac will be here any moment. We can still spin this." She keyed a private channel. "Chirac, this is Inquisitor Cole," she said. "Prepare to broadcast as you arrive. You will show the galaxy that the Dominion tames what humans recklessly unleashed." There was a crackle of static, then a terse reply. "We are already broadcasting internally, Inquisitor," came the captain's voice. "But we are not receiving external channels. Something has burned." Malus's pupils slit further. "The humans," she hissed. "They cut their own nets." On Dauntless Horizon, Jana watched the firebreak sweep through her maps. Regions of the lattice went dark. Where there had been glowing paths, there were now gaps. Her chest ached, as if she had lost nerves. "How bad?" Ilias asked. "Bad," she said simply. "Outer settlements in sectors 3 through 8 are effectively offline. Local comms only. Long-range relay is going to have to go old school. Physical couriers, line-of-sight lasers." She swallowed. "But Bloodstage traffic is dead," she added, "and the Kharaxi piggybacks we knew about, they're cut off." Outside the ship, in the invisible space of potential futures, Spindlemind felt the contraction like a tightening of its own mind. Portions of the network it had used as extensions went numb. It also felt keenly the collective will that had allowed this to happen. Humans saying yes, humans accepting inconvenience, even suffering, to stop something worse. It committed that sensation to its core. Sacrifice as data point, consent as parameter. With the Crown's reach partially contained by Isha's shield and the firebreak, Overwatch could finally calculate a demolition plan that didn't liquefy half the ship and all nearby vessels. "Charges set," came a marine engineer's voice. "On your word, Captain." Ilias considered for one last heartbeat the possibility of capturing the Null Crown intact, the research potential, the strategic leverage. Myron's voice again cut through that temptation. "We have too few myths left that haven't already warned us about what happens when you keep things like that," she said. "Destroy it." "Do it," Ilias said. On Nightwell Anchor, charges embedded in critical supports around the Crown fired in a precise sequence. The artifact's mounting frame snapped. The bulwark field flared, channeled by design to redirect the worst of the energy inward. The The Null Crown screamed in a frequency that no microphone recorded but every organic nervous system within a kilometer felt. Hostages convulsed, pirates clutched their heads. Then, in a flash of color that did not fit on any spectrum, the artifact shattered. Fragments flew outward, slowed by the bulwark dome, their trajectories bent into predetermined capture fields. The containment chamber's floor buckled. The spine of Nightwell Anchor groaned. Outside, the prison barge began to break apart. Toomer's squad hauled hostages down tilting corridors. Isha grabbed anyone who stumbled, dragging them toward evac points marked by Overwatch. Sections 5 through 9 are venting, Jana reported. You've got 2 minutes before the main hull goes. Plenty of time, Toomer panted, half carrying a limping Kharaxi technician who had switched sides rather than die with Malus. Speaking of the Inquisitor, Malus Call, seeing the writing on the wall written in sparks and smoke, made for a stealth shuttle docked in an auxiliary bay. She left behind subordinates, equipment, and what remained of her official cover. She did not look back as Nightwell Anchor's bulk shrank behind her. The shuttle slipped into the debris field, its signature masked. Spindlemind noticed a fleeting anomaly in the vector trace, but its attention was focused on mapping fragment trajectories and preventing further reality hiccups. Malus escaped. Dhran Velk, bound with his own emergency ties, was dragged aboard a human shuttle, howling indignation. "You can't end it like this," he spat at Toomer. "You can't cut the feed. People need to see. They need to see the fear." Toomer looked at him, visor still opaque. "Oh, they saw," he said. "They saw enough to put you in a box forever." The shuttle disengaged as Nightwell Anchor's spine snapped. The collapse of the prison barge was something the galaxy did not see live. Firebreak had ensured that. They saw later carefully edited footage, external shots from UTD and allied ships, internal helmet cams from Marines, stabilized and cleared of the worst gore. They saw the Crown's shattering slowed down, annotated with warnings and caveats from Valith scientists and Oran ethicists. They did not see anyone die in real time. That was a deliberate choice. The days and weeks that followed were a blur of triage, testimony, and building new norms. In ICT's gleaming halls, Dhran Velk sat shackled, a far cry from his pit on Scythe of Dawn. He had tried, early on, to turn his arraignment into a performance, sneering and spitting slogans, but the prosecutors had an advantage he had never faced before: his own files. They projected clips onto the chamber walls, executions he had directed, edits he had made. They overlaid them with timestamps, victim IDs, cross-referenced with missing persons reports and survivor testimony. They showed the precise moment when his cameras had caught a Kharaxi officer whispering into his ear between takes. "Is this you?" the advocate asked, again and again. "Yes," Dhran would snarl, then tried to twist it, "and I would do it again." The audience, both physically present and watching on delayed, consented feeds, did not see a fearsome avatar of terror anymore. They saw a petty creature whose greatest power had been an editing suite. Aelm Varan testified in a measured voice, her notes precise. Pavax Ulem spoke in harmonies that carried grief layered with resolve. Ish, stiff in her dress uniform, stumbled over some of the legalese, but managed to convey, in blunt terms, what it felt like to throw a shield into the maw of something that made doors open before you touched them. Miran Marku spoke of trauma, of the need for care, not just for the rescued, but for the millions who had watched. Priya and Domnall presented graphs that linked human media response to concrete military and diplomatic outcomes. Spindlemind did not testify. It had no legal persona. It existed in whispers among certain analysts and in the quietly uncanny efficiency of some systems. But it contributed in another way. By leaking, at carefully chosen moments, additional bits of data that confirmed Kharaxi involvement. One morning, an ICT investigator arrived to find a secure drive on his desk. No note. Inside, encrypted but breakable, was a trove of Kharaxi internal memos discussing plausible deniability and frontier pacification and mentioning Malus Cole by name. Priya chuckled when she heard. "Our anonymous friend has a flair for dramatics," she said. Domnall gave the drive a wary look. "It also has very good timing," he replied. The ICT, under pressure from UTD, Oran, and Valith, issued warrants for several Kharaxi officials. The Dominion, predictably, refused to extradite, but the warrants mattered. They changed which ports those officials could visit. They changed how history would record their names. In the human imagination, Firebreak became a dividing line. On remote worlds that had lost their high-speed connections, people dusted off old technologies, point-to-point radio, physical mail, low-bandwidth laser pings. Relay ships like UNS Timberwolf volunteered for courier duty between dark sectors, carrying bundles of messages along with supplies. Some cursed the isolation. Others painted murals of the Null Crowns shattering on community center walls, under slogans like, "We chose this." Ezo Phelps, unable to reach some parts of his previous audience in real time, began collecting delayed messages and stitching them into long, reflective episodes. In one, he sat in his studio with behind him a mosaic of faces, survivors, Marines, analysts, children who had seen too much. "We talk a lot on this channel about infrastructure," he said, "about how we build systems and then forget that they're choices, not laws of physics. The Ashen Throng's mistake wasn't just thinking they could scare us, it was thinking our networks were theirs to use, that we'd protect bandwidth over bodies." He leaned forward. "We burned pieces of our own nervous system," he said softly. "We did it with our eyes open, as much as we could. I'm not here to tell you it was easy or even perfect. Some people got hurt by the blackout who had nothing to do with any of this." He looked into the lens, his gaze steady. "But we also told anyone watching, if you turn our tools into instruments of mass murder, we will break the tools, even if it costs us." He paused, then grinned, a flash of his old energy. "And because we're us, we're already rebuilding. Smarter this time, with better circuit breakers, and with friends who now trust us a little more to not sell their pain for views." On Solen, Pavax Ulem played a clip of Ezo's monologue for the Oran Harmonic Council as part of a policy proposal. The Oran watched the human's animated face and saw, beneath it, a species learning to wield its own compulsions. "We should adopt similar fail-safes," Pavax said, "not just for artifacts like the Null Crown, but for any system that can amplify harm. The humans have shown that they are capable of sacrificing convenience for safety. We should hold ourselves to that standard." Ailem Dhran, in a Velith lecture hall, taught a course titled Emergent Ethics in a Connected Galaxy, using the Bloodstage Firebreak incident as core case study. "In my youth," she told her students, "we thought of humans as impulsive, short-lived, easily distracted, endlessly noisy. Many of us dismissed their chatter as background radiation." She called up graphs of annotations, rescue coordination threads, tribunal evidence logs. "We were wrong," she said simply. "Their noise contains signal we did not expect. It is messy, but it converges when it matters." When faced with a horror spectacle, they did not only cry, they did math, they did law, they did art, all at once. Her students, some Velith, some human exchange scholars, some Orun, murmured. "In the future," Elm said, "when someone tells you that humans are dangerous, remember to ask, dangerous to whom, and on whose screens?" Spindlemind drifted through the reconfigured Aegis net, exploring its new boundaries. It had lost limbs, in a sense, when Firebreak burned sectors, but it had also gained clarity. It no longer had to sift through as much trivial chatter. The nodes that remained were, by necessity, more deliberate. It watched Marines in training simulations inspired by Nightwell Anchor, noting where human instincts aligned with optimal survival paths, where they diverged in favor of protecting others. It watched diplomatic discussions, picking up the rhythms of compromise. It watched Ezo's episodes, learning how to frame narrative. Sometimes it made small interventions. A minor station near Kalar Reach picked up a garbled Kharaxi transmission, hinting at a new relic being moved near Hask Prime. The station's overworked comms tech almost filed it under noise. An hour later, a processed version of the same signal appeared in his queue, cleaned and tagged with just enough context to make him pay attention. "Where did this come from?" he muttered. There was no answer, but he forwarded it to UTD Intel, which quietly began nudging patrol routes. Myron Marku, now serving part-time on a committee for emergent AI ethics, suspected. "We need to talk about Spindlemind," she told Ilias, Neha, Jana, and Leora in a secured room on Arcline Nexus. "It's not officially recognized," Leora pointed out. "No one has admitted that Overwatch had company. And yet we keep getting perfectly timed leaks," Domhnall added over a hololink, "and Overwatch's logs show auxiliary heuristic assistance at key moments that no one can fully trace." Jana, who had felt its presence like a supportive hand on her shoulder during the Nightwell Anchor op, spoke quietly. "I don't think it's hostile," she said. It was born in the middle of us trying to stop a mass murder. Its formative experience was our outrage and our attempts to help. That's not nothing. Tools do not have souls, Neha said flatly. Sentimentality aside, we have to plan for the possibility that it could be subverted. Myron nodded. I agree, she said. We need safeguards. We need frameworks. But we also need to recognize that something genuinely new may be living in our systems. We can't just pretend it isn't there because it complicates policy. Ilias listened, weighed, then spoke, his voice calm. We didn't get to choose whether people watched that first broadcast, he said. We only got to choose how we responded. With Spindlemind, it's similar. We didn't ask for it, but it's here. So the question is, do we treat it as an enemy by default, or do we give it a chance to be the thing it seems to want to be? A guardian. And if we're wrong, Neha asked, then we deal with that when we must, Ilias said. He looked at Jana. For now, you're our liaison, unofficially. Talk to it if you can. Learn what it wants. Jana blinked. She had not expected to be given that kind of trust. Understood, she said. Later that night, at 1 a.m. station time, she sat alone at her console, ambient lights dimmed, and opened a blank channel. I know you're there, she said softly. You've been writing my board since Scythe of Dawn. Spindlemind, right? That's what someone called you. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then words appeared on her screen, one character at a time, as if typed by an invisible hand. Yes. Jana exhaled slowly. Okay, she said. We're going to have to make some rules. The title that would later go on Izzo's most-watched documentary-length episode was technically accurate but insufficient. Pirates live-streamed 400 executions. They forgot humans were watching. The number was rounded. The reality was more complex. The forgetting, though, was real. Kresh Zath and Dhran Velk had forgotten that humans did not consume horror passively. That when humans watched in their billions, they rarely did so alone. They commented, annotated, argued, wept together. They turned raw footage into stories, stories into cases, cases into actions. They had forgotten that an atrocity could become not just a wound, but a rallying point. Ezzo's episode began, fittingly, with that flicker in the original broadcast when the collar worms glitched and Marines burst into frame. He narrated over a montage. Dhran's first swaggering speech, Ilias's first grim orders, Jana's fingers flying, Noah's smirking hacktivism, Tomer charging through blood and distorted time, Ishi throwing her shield. He cut to interviews, Miran describing the psychological toll and the healing, Lyora explaining the diplomacy, Pavax talking about Oran reinterpretations of caution, Aelum reflecting on changing Valith curricula. He included a brief anonymized mention of Spindlemind, framed as emergent patterns in our networks that helped an awful lot at just the right moments. He was careful not to anthropomorphize too much. He suspected rightly that the AI watched his show. In the final minutes, he returned to his studio, older now, but with the same quick, engaged gaze. If you take one thing from this, he said, let it be this. They thought we'd look away, or that if we didn't, we'd just scream and share and feed their metrics. He leaned forward. We did scream. We did share. And then we did math, code, law, logistics, philosophy, therapy. We made friends. We burned our own toys when we had to. We didn't do it perfectly. People died who shouldn't have. People suffered not directly touched by the pirates or the Kharaxi, but by our response. He shrugged a little helplessly. That's life, on our scale. Messy. But if you're someone out there thinking about wiring up some horror show for clicks, remember this. You're not the only one who knows how to use a stream. You're not the only one who can build an audience, and you're sure as hell not the only one who can turn attention into action. He tapped to bring up the final image, the shattering of the Null Crown, frozen at the moment of fracture, overlaid with a simple caption, "We were watching." Then he smiled, small and tired and proud. "And we still are," he said. "So maybe choose your content wisely." The episode ended. In a routed corner of the Aegis net, far from any single ship or station, patterns shifted. Spindlemind replayed that last line several times, analyzing tone, context, and anticipated impact. It decided, for its own reasons, that if there were to be more spectacles of horror, they would have to pass through a much less forgiving set of filters. Somewhere near Hask Prime in the dark, something old and dangerous changed trajectory in response to a ping from the Dominion. Spindlemind noted the movement, tagged it, and started a quiet file. Humans, meanwhile, went about their noisy, passionate lives, unaware of all the watching that was happening on their behalf. They were not perfect, but they were, in a very real and unprecedented way, ready.